everybody. The first thing on the docket is to review and approve the minutes from February 27th, 2023. I looked over the minutes and I didn't see anything that I thought should be shifted or changed. I don't know if anyone else saw anything in the minutes that Mary sent. Hi, welcome everybody. I linked them into the agenda, and I will throw that back into the chat for folks who want to make sure that they have access to that. And this is just the one that has the links in it.
Okay. No, can I ask, it's not February 27th, it's the March ones, right?
Oh, let me check. I might have honestly had the wrong date in it when I copied it over. You're right. Okay, so I just need to amend that it's the minutes from March 20th. You're right. I think I just forgot to change it when I copied the agenda over.
Okay.
So you're right. Good. So we're reviewing and approving the minutes from March 30th.
20th.
Right. Sorry, March 20th, 2023. Sorry, you can tell from my lack of sleep. I may not have numbers today. Okay. Did anyone else see anything in the minutes they wanted to see changed or they had a question about, or do we have a motion to approve the minutes as they are?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I have one comment, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah.
I also write minutes for my day job, and the debate is always how succinct can it be, and I think part of me thinks that maybe the minutes can be a little less detailed, be a little bit more succinct. But again, that's a matter for debate. I know minutes don't need to be detailed transcripts. So otherwise, I mean, I think I'm okay with approving the minutes.
And I feel like that's totally true. And in the commission I sit on, they're definitely not nearly as detailed, but if we have somebody like Mary who's willing to take these extremely detailed minutes and keep track of kind of what these decisions are, and I feel like there's sort of no downside to it. So I really appreciate the care that you put in, Mary, and I would obviously vote to approve the minutes.
I would also say that I appreciate as chair because often questions do come up, like, oh, when did we agree to that? And what exactly did we agree to? And it can be really helpful to have the specific information in there, including sometimes Mary will address the thought process, which can help later because you can remember why you vote or how the vote ended, but you may not remember some of the dissenting arguments that later do come up and matter. So I did appreciate that. All right, so Michael made a motion to approve. Helene, was that a second?
Sure, although I think someone else did, but either way, second or third.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the minutes, do a roll call. Sorry, Mary, yep.
So just on, in regards to the minutes. So I have a hard time deciding what to throw out. You aren't getting an exact transcript, but I do try to be factual. I have a viewpoint that the minutes are supposed to be a true history so that if we have a problem with something, we go back. And the other viewpoint I have is that if someone says something, they felt it was important enough to do that. And so I have a hard time eliminating what people say. So, I don't know. That's where I'm coming from. So I don't know. Just eliminating what people say and changing things so that it's my opinion of what happened is hard for me to do. I do try to put the motions in emboldened and italics, so at least you can go right to that if you need it. And I agree, they are too long and they're hard to read when they're that long, but that's my rationale.
Mary, it's fine. As Megan said, I think we all agree or echo the fact that you couldn't ask for more. It's well done in all aspects. I commend you on the thoroughness and the complete history of what occurred at a meeting. Like Megan indicated, as time goes on, we want to use that. We can use that as a reference to see, should we be asked by the city council or by some committee on what or why did you arrive at this decision? Going back to those minutes is a helpful reminder to us all that why we voted in the manner that we voted. So Nathan, I know where you're coming from, but Mary, you are as accurate and as thorough can be. And I commend you, quite honestly, for taking up this task.
Okay, well, I do appreciate the all of the comments, and I will try. I really do try to reduce it, but thank you.
All right, folks, we'll do a roll call to approve the minutes as is. And thank you for the conversation, everyone. I think it's important to talk about process and why we do things the way we do, and attempting for conciseness, but also wanting detail. Like, I think that's always the eternal argument around minutes. All right, Helene Busby.
Yes.
Nathan Chung.
Yes.
Michael Falsetti.
Yes.
Chris Gauthier.
Yes.
Meg McGrath-Smith. Yes. Mary Moriarty.
Yes.
Jessica Nunez. I actually had time to write a list this time. This was great. I always forget I need to have a roll call list at the beginning. Okay. The next one is a bit odd. It's the FY23 officers election. So when we initially had our officers election, not July of this year, but of last year, we thought that it was for 2 years. When I went into the ordinance, the language itself of our bylaws recently, there are a few things that I picked up on that, again, you kind of get used to doing things as you do them. And then you go back in and look and you're like, oh, actually, we were supposed to do it like this. So we need to actually have officers not for 2-year terms, but for 1-year terms, and we're supposed to re-up them annually. So what that means is that we missed that vote this year. So we're going to have that vote now. And then in July, we will open it up for who is interested in being the officers, right? We have a chair, we have a vice chair, we have a secretary. We also technically have the capacity to have a treasurer. This cycle, we decided not to have a treasurer and instead to work with a financial consultant that we were able to use the CPA admin budget in order to purchase this year. And that's something that the committee in July, right, might want to re-up. Like, is there someone that we have who would be willing to step up and be treasurer and work with the financial consultant and maybe be able to take on some pieces of that role, right? But the CPA accounting piece is very complicated. And so the committee has not done that. And even when we had a treasurer, we were really working with, at the time, Andrew McMahon to do that work, our former chair. Just to give a little bit of history of that. Okay, so currently our officers are me as chair, Michael Falsetti as vice chair, and Mary Moriarty as secretary. I would like to make a motion for us to vote to kind of retroactively approve it from July to the end of June, with the understanding that we will then have a new officers election for the FY 23 to 24 year in July.
So moved.
Is there any discussion?
Second. Oh,
thank you. Is there any discussion? I know we discussed it last meeting, but I wanted it to be officially on the agenda before we voted. Okay. All right. So we'll do a roll call vote. Helene Busby.
Yes.
Nathan Chung.
yes.
Michael Falsetti.
Yes.
Chris Gauthier.
Yes.
Meg McGrath-Smith. Yes. Mary Moriarty.
Yes.
And Francesca Nunez. Okay. All right. The next one is updates on past projects. So pretty quickly, MIFA Murals. So the contract was drafted. Michael and I met as the contract subcommittee to review it and to look at it and talk to Amy about it. And then we sent it to the city solicitor, Kathy Dugnan, who has been assigned to CPA to work with us, to look at it as well. And she suggested that we tighten up the language in one section. And she actually made some small shifts to it. We're still waiting for that actual draft. She said there was not significant change, but there were a few small changes that were made. She's going to get it back to us within the next day or two. She also said that because one of the provisions is that in the event that the Victory Theater is not restored, that it then, you know, becomes a permanent loan to the city and could be installed in a building in the city, that we do need a letter from the mayor and from anyone else that he deems is necessary, basically saying we accept that language in the contract, that we would in fact want to accept that as a perpetual loan to the city, and we would take on the responsibility of figuring out like storage or where would you hang it, which I appreciated. I thought that was a good push.
Yeah, good idea.
So she's going to get us the amended contract within the next day or two. We're going to send that to the mayor and ask for that letter, and then we'll update the committee next meeting as to what the mayor does. Hopefully we'll have the letter in hand. But other than that, the contract's ready to move forward, which is really exciting.
Oh, it's a good idea.
Wistariahurst Museum repainting. Has anyone driven by? Right?
Yeah.
It is in progress. So you can go see the painting. I suggest you go do that. It's super fun to see it in action. And there was actually an article in the paper today. Just pulling it up so I can share screen. So this was in Mass Live this morning with some elbow grease. Holyoke's Wistariahurst Museum restored to buttery yellow hue. You can see that picture there of them scraping it. It's a really good article that sort of describes the process and why they're doing this to return it to its historic color. And it's just wonderful. So if you get a chance, I would definitely suggest that you read the article. Megan Sealer, it's a Sealer or Seiler? I get it wrong every time.
I don't know.
I'm going to write it out phonetically and practice it so that I don't make that mistake again. I'm not sure. Sure, it's going to look like a jewel in this neighborhood. It's going to glisten, especially once the gardens come in bloom. I'm excited we can show it off, show our pride, and give this great building a new coat of love from the community. So I just thought that was lovely. And I definitely shared it on the Facebook CPA page today because it's a really great article. The Girls Inc. Former O'Connell building project. So exciting news that the preservation restriction was drafted, approved by the city solicitor, and then recorded. So good to like have that process happen, and also happen in such a nice way. Like they drafted it and then it was approved and then it was recorded and it was done. It was great, as things should happen. So just, I was really excited that it happened as easily and like in a streamlined way. Mary, your hand's up.
Yes, and I'm deciding whether I should ask now or later, but there's no temporary sign saying that the painting is at Wistariahurst is being done by the
yes,
the money. So I can bring that up later because I'm sure that's going to come up on all of these.
So one thing that Amy had been working on was around the banners, because we've actually had a number of issues where the banners have not been returned to us. And so I know Amy's been working hard on getting banners returned so that they can go back out. I saw a bunch of emails that she sent this week being like, you still have your banner. We'd love it back. Could you drop it off? So maybe that's part of it. I'm sure Amy can speak to that too when we get to the next agenda item. Okay.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Madam Chairman, through you to Amy. Amy, if you want to, I can drive by whatever the location is of the folks that still have our banners, and I can pick them up and drop them off to Megan or to you, if it'll be easier for you, if they want to look for someplace to drop it off.
Well, actually, I've already worked that out with the last person who is going to. They said they'll have someone who will be able to drop it off, I'm pretty sure, tomorrow.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah. But thank you. I'll let you know. There might be an opportunity where we really use your help. Yeah.
Sure.
I like that you put it in such a way, Amy. Okay. Chestnut Street Valley Opportunity Council. Amy, you had sent the update about the ribbon cutting that is the 21st of this month on the Friday. And that is not, it's at the I guess it's just part of a larger project, right? And like CPA is part of that project, but it's like the whole project is now actually finished.
Oh, I think the part that is the CPA funded part, I think is ongoing right now, which is why we're trying to get Stephen Huntley the temporary banner. So the 337 Chestnut Street for the housing, the 348 for the historic. But I guess that maybe that particular building is finished, and it's sort of also representative of the larger work going on.
But the CPA part is not quite done, is what you're saying.
I don't think so, because in fact, I didn't even know he had begun. This is just something I found out now, that it began in early January. So I'm trying to get him caught up with, reports on what's happened. Yeah.
The Pulaski Park wall restoration. So I had a citizen reach out and just ask, like, is this moving along? The wall's definitely really crumbling. Is anything happening? And somebody messaged us on our Facebook page too, asking about it, like a different person. So I emailed back out to the city engineer, Chris Baker, and asked about it. And this was what they wrote back. He wrote, I'm back in contact with the engineer because we need to, and he used a term that I'm not, I'll have to just read the term, and I'm not exactly sure what it means. We need to CCTV the sewer lines. I'm guessing that means something. The sewer lines. I don't know what that means. Does anyone know what CCTV means?
I do. And they did explain it at a meeting. So the problem is they think that there are some lines that go under the walkway, and they need to, they put in, a little, video thing in a tube underneath to see what the condition is in there, and whether it's an important line, whether it needs to be replaced or if it can be, closed up or whatever. But so, it's like this little rotor-rooter with a camera.
All I'm imagining is like a colonoscopy for sewer pipes.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Am I like seeing this right? Sorry. All right, Michael.
Madam Chairman, to Mary's point, the biggest enemy of, especially in that location, is roots of trees. And over time, the roots of the trees simply wrap around the pipe to get at the moisture, and they crush believe it or not, they crush the pipes.
Are these the trees that are in Pulaski Park, or the ones that the railroad land they haven't cleared?
Yeah, it could be in any adjacent tree nearby. Those roots are like, they crack pipes to get at the moisture inside over time, and they wrap it around. Then they actually start to grow right into the pipe to suck the moisture out. Yeah. And now you really got a problem if that's the case. So the city engineer is entirely correct. That would be a killer if they should discover that late in the game. We need to
CCTV the sewer lines to make sure that there isn't a drainage issue. And then we will need to do some geotechnical boring to make sure the soil is suitable material and not the reason the wall is leaning. I will have a proposal with the engineer soon. So it's an update, and we'll keep on it and see what happens as a result of that. There, I think, is a small section of funding still left in that original award that would be tied to them being able to do that work with the geotechnical boring and the sewer line stuff. Okay, so that's that update. And then the last one is just the Glauchak Woods event. So I had made flyers, which I then shared on our Facebook page and on Hello Holyoke for the event that's coming up. A huge thank you to Helene Busby for spearheading it and moving it along and having such a fantastic idea, and then pulling others in from conservation and parks and us to start planning it. I'm super excited about it. Helene, do you want to say like a brief and brilliant about what the event is and why you wanted to do it?
Sure. So the event is Friday, the 21st of April, which is the Friday of the April vacation for the public school students. It's also a week that the Greenagers who were building and renovating the trails in Glauchak Woods last summer are coming back for their spring break. They're going to work that week to sort of freshen things up that they did last year, you know, to get things ready for the people to be out in the woods again. And so, you know, I think this is, I've said before in meetings, like a really incredible project. It's one of my favorite projects that we've funded since I've been here, and in part because it's like just such incredible like use of resources, in that it's like, let's be honest, it's not that much money compared to some of the other things that we've funded, but it's money that goes to hire local youth, and so that money goes right into the community, because they spend the money, they have, you know, they save for their college, or, you know, whatever, but it's just like extremely targeted right back into the community. And the Green Agers program is, you know, providing job skills, but it's in opportunities, but it's also like enriching. So they're learning about like the ecology and, you know, some of like the kind of practical like physics of how these trail kind of process works. And then they're literally building the trails that the community can use to walk on and enjoy this public land. And so they're like literally building the community, which is like so great to have the youth like doing that. So anyway, I feel like those are all just the things that we want to hammer home about what CPA can do, you know, this project in different permutations, you know, for years to come. And so the students will be kind of, or the young people will be kind of finishing up on Friday. And so they're going to do like a guided hike on that day. And so what we're doing is kind of a family friendly event at Glowtech Park from 1 to 3 with some crafts, you know, really wanting it to be a place that if families, you know, because they have the week off, can stop by and kind of just have like a nice time. Parks is going to provide some water and some snacks, and so there's going to be kind of activities for kids, and then folks that want to can take that hike led by the young people who've been working over the summer and then this spring on the trails to kind of show off like this area, which, you know, a lot of like it's a pretty recent procurement, correct, of these woods. And so, you know, not everyone may realize that they're available for going for a walk and enjoying.
A number of people, in fact, the most common question that we've gotten on the Facebook post has been, and where is this? Like, they don't even know where Glowtech Woods is, right? So that's been, I think, good to get it out there, and just get people out there and using it, because they are new public trails. And so the public should know that they can go have access to them. Also, as we know about other spots in the city, the more use it gets, the better use it gets. This was the flyer that we made, and then this is the Spanish version of the flyer that we made. And both we've shared on Facebook and are available on our CPA page if you want to share it with any groups that you are affiliated with, and we would love to see all of you there. And a special thank you to Yoni Glaugauer for working with the Green Agers side of this, and Helene and Mary for supporting with the planning. Mary has been working with some different youth groups to get, like, it's April vacation, right? School vacation week. So getting youth organizations in the city who are running kids events over that time to bring their kids to it. So I think it's going to be a really good event. And I think we potentially could get a really good reception. We can get a really good group of folks to come out. So exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm. And Megan put that flyer together, it seemed like in like 2 seconds, and it looks really amazing. So very impressed.
That stuff was fun.
Yep, that was very impressive.
Well, it was funny. The best part of that meeting was they were like, we should have a flyer. And I was like, oh no, this whole time that you've been telling me about this event, I've been making it.
Well done.
Okay, awesome. Very excited about that. Okay, we're going to move to an update from Amy, the CPA Administrator. She's going to share the stuff that she's been working on the last month. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the preservation plan. Everyone's favorite, most exciting topic.
Okay, hi everyone. So first, before I launch into what I've been doing, I wanted to mention that I'm hoping that there'll be media there at the GlowTech event, and someone will be taking pictures, because that's a great opportunity to add to the website. Okay, so and Facebook. So what I've been to give you an idea of what I've been doing. So I follow up on all the different projects, or do my best to do that. And a lot of this, what I'm doing all the time is I'm getting invoices from different projects. So most recently, the fire truck project, and that's been rather complicated because communication has not been as clear as it's been a little confusing, the communication I've gotten. So just trying to make sure I'm on the same page with Deputy Tom Shea and moving that along, as well as I just got all the invoices for Girls Inc. So that project is done and they need to be reimbursed. So I have to review like lengthy documents and like make sure that I understand that, yes, this is the CPA funds that were expended and that they were expended for the right things that were approved in the contract. And then process that through the requisition order, which has to be done, with the city system. So there's a whole process involved every time I get an invoice like that. And then I'm also documenting the expenditures for the CPA budget spreadsheet, which I've been working on with Daniel Koff, who was hired to be the budget consultant. So I have to put in the exact purchase order number for every expenditure. And then that will show how much was expended from that project, how much is left, and so forth. So all of that needs to be done. And then I'm also updating the administrative expenses, like for my pay, to make sure that we're not overspending, so we have a handle on how much is left. I'm looking into the MUNIS, which is the city accounting system, to get that information. I also look at the quarterly reports that we're now getting from the different projects. And try to see, what's new with those different projects and update on a sort of master database spreadsheet for every project. As Meg mentioned, the signage, I'm making sure that new projects have a temporary banner or that they're following up on a permanent sign. And I'm right now working on ordering more of those banners because 10 really isn't enough at this point. We need to get more. Okay, so then the other big thing that I've been working on is the FY24 proposed budget to City Council, because you see that budget has to be sent to City Council before it can be, before the tax rate is set for the surcharge that, brings in revenue for CPA. So there's a deadline for that, a week before the City Council meeting. And I can quickly share screen. Let's see if this works to show you. Show you that. Okay, so this is what I sent to the city clerk. Does everybody see this? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you can see this is the overarching proposed budget, which is it's based on a projection for FY24 that the revenue will be $591,574. So anyway, I could go into a lot of detail, but this is kind of based on last year's and what I learned from the assessor. And then the estimated state match is we're doing a conservative one, 20%, because, and this is what we've been advised by the CP Coalition. And so the total we're asking for, we're saying would be the CPA budget right now is $709,889. That's rounded to the nearest dollar. And then this is how it's broken up. And the language that is that these are proposed transfers for open space, historic, community, and the remaining amount of the revenue, which is called the budgeted reserve, which is 65%. It's 10% of each category and 65% is the leftover amount. And then the appropriation, what that means, that word means appropriation, is that it's committed. In other words, they're saying not only this will go towards this, but it's committed towards this one use, which is 5% for administration expenses. So that's to pay my salary and also for, things like the budget consultant and any other type of supplies and things like that. $35,494. Now this can be amended later, but this is, and this is not all the money that we have, just to make clear, because there's money that gets carried over that's been unexpended from before. And so one thing I've been doing is working with a new budget consultant on a system that he set up, very elaborate, because as Meg said, the CPA budget is very complicated because we're dealing with multiple years and multiple budgets. But basically, I figured out that we have, we'll probably have almost $1.5 million for projects in FY24. So this is based on work that we've been doing with Daniel, that I've been doing with Daniel. So that's sort of adding the remaining amount that's been carried over from previous years, which is $747,216 to this current proposed budget. And then minusing the admin amount, the 5%, which is leaving us with the amount I just said, which is about $1,419,611 for FY24. Okay, so I'll stop. Does I don't know if anybody had anything they wanted to say about that, but I'll just go on. So the other thing I've been doing is just things like I noticed, that MIFA, making sure that they recognize CPA in their materials, communicating with them about that. Also drafting the MIFA mural contract that Meg mentioned and sending questions to the city solicitor. There's back and forth on that. Another big thing I've been doing is I set up a leverage fund sheet to show how much money is being leveraged with the local CPA match, which is just very important for, I'm going to see if I can, I was going to see if I could share that, but I don't see that open right now.
Maybe I just put up my screen. So at the top,
okay.
I asked the web designer to put that in as a banner at the top. So CPA is brought in.
I think it's even higher now. That's what I wanted to share screen to show you, because I just got another project to put in more information. Oh, is this the most recent one? Yeah. Okay. So you can see now, over 42 million here has been leveraged.
Amy, are you saying that we generated, our committee, working with our people, generated for 5 years, 42 million?
What I'm saying is that
CPA is required as a way to get access to state and federal funding that we can't get any other way. The city has to usually put up a certain percentage of the overall project, or the community has to put up a certain percentage of the overall project costs in order to have access to state and federal funding sources.
No,
right, and this does not even, just to clarify, so they need to show that they have local support, that they have a local CPA match when they apply for state funds or federal funds or whatever it is, and then they were able to bring in this amount of money. And I'm still getting more information. I haven't gotten Wistariahurst yet to fill this out. So this is not the final number of how much money is coming to the city of Holyoke through CPA, and it does not include the state match, which comes in based on the revenue, which is something
we should add as well. We can add that on line 15.
Right.
Well, who could ever imagine 5 years ago this amount would occur? Nobody could imagine this. Well done, all you guys on CPA. Well done.
Yeah, and same to you. So it's just important for, especially with the reconsideration or possible reconsideration of CPA, that people really understand what it's all about. Another thing I did is I'm almost finished. I had a phone conference with a potential CPA applicant. I think it was the Bethlehem Baptist Church. They're interested in possibly applying for historic funds, and I gave them a lot of background and tried to give them a sense of, it is a complicated process for historic projects, and also sent them a follow-up email with a lot of background links that they can educate themselves on. And, just doing things like updating the website with our meeting tonight, setting up the Zoom, promoting different events, like as Meg does also on Facebook. I noticed that we got, I don't know if we got to this in the agenda, that City Council did approve the recommendations that the committee voted on, but I noticed that there was a mistake in 2 of the different projects, and I was worried that they reduced the funding, but it turns out it's most likely a typo. I just contacted the city clerk and Jeffrey and found out that it's most likely a typo. So, but it's still very important that I have the accurate record, just like we were talking about the minutes. I have to have this to, because later, the auditor asks for it, the city solicitor, they want to know, oh, do you really have this money that you can say, that you can state goes in this contract? And I have to send them proof. So it has to be correct. So yeah, there's even more, but I know I've already talked too much, so.
Thank you for sharing. I think it's really important for the committee to know, I know all the work that you're doing for the committee. So I really wanted to make sure that you were sharing that out.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh yes, Mary.
I just want to offer another word of appreciation for all you did, especially in terms of that leverage chart.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also sticking with it, because initially it was, we'd heard back from a couple people, and then Amy just kept like, could you please give me this information? Could you please fill this out? Really, do you want it to be accurate?
Because for some of them, like the Wayfinders project, it takes a lot of digging because they have so many applications and they've had different people taking over. So they have to go back and weed through a lot to figure it out. So.
Wow, well done.
Yeah, and the Wayfinders project in particular, I don't know if, a lot of new folks in the committee since then, but when they came to us, they were like, the city can only come up with $250,000 out of their own municipal budget, and we can't access the funding that we need. We have to have at least 500,000, or we can't even get access to it. We have to have a certain percentage. And so we were like, okay. And then we took it as an emergency application. We took them out of cycle because we could. Right. And that's partly why we're pretty conservative with spending, because every now and then someone comes to us and they need CPA to make the difference up so that they can, throw their hat in their name in the hat and start moving forward with an application. And us being able to do that is really key. Okay. Oh, we're so excited. The CPA preservation plan. It's our next agenda item. Okay. So, the document that I linked in there, and I said the focus area was on pages 23 to 29. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we have to go back to our people, right? We all have different communities that we're connected to, or we are on this, committee because we are also on a board or a commission or in a department. And so we need to, at this point, figure out how we are going to get it on an agenda moving forward with the groups that we're a part of to reassess, like, what has CPA done so far that connects to your area, right? Whether that's housing, whether that is historic preservation, whether that's open space and rec. And we have to come up with a process for us to share what we've done so far for CPA and ask them, what areas do you think should be priorities for CPA moving forward? So we've had CPA for 5 years. Here's what we've accomplished. And I'm happy to send out some resources to kind of guide that a little bit. Like, you might want to highlight this doc here that goes over the projects. You might want to, show them the map, for example, on the website. But effectively, we need to share what we've done so far and then ask them for their feedback and say, we're going to create an addendum now that we're at the 5-year part. If anything significant comes out. If it all comes out as, nope, the plan looks great, keep on trucking, then we won't do anything. But it might come out that, you go to your meeting and someone says, actually, I really think this has to be named, that you should be trying to figure out how to help this, or you should be preserving this historic asset, or you really should be focusing on the following parks, right? Whatever that feedback is. I don't know what feedback we're going to get. We have to ask to see what we get, right? So, on our website, we have a lot of information, right? So over here, we have CPA in the news. If you click there, you see all of the articles. CPA is covered in the news constantly. So you can always come here to see the newest articles that are in the paper about CPA. You can pull out ones that are specific to your department, commission, area of focus to share. You have the CPA videos here. And then underneath the project map, wow. What's going on with my project map here? There we go. I don't know if I got super zoomed in or zoomed out. You can kind of share this with, your relevant folks, specific projects. These are all color coded, and I created symbols for them. So anything that has the basketball is a park, okay, or related to recreation. Anything that's a little guy hiking, that's going to be open space. Anything that's a blue, I've picked it because I thought it looked like the Armory building. The blue that symbolizes historic projects, and then orange symbolizes housing, right? So you might want to focus in on the ones that are specific to your focus area in the group that you are in for what we've accomplished so far. And then of course there's more information here by year over here in the projects tabs. And then in the map itself, any of these are clickable. So you can say, okay, the John F. Kennedy Memorial, and it will have different images that you can look at to see the completed work. And then underneath it will have a description of the project. So that's a good place to start as you're trying to figure out like what projects would I want to share. And then the piece that we're focusing on here is the 2018 Community Preservation Plan. So this document was created in 2018 with the Communities Opportunities Group, which was like a specific grant that I think came out of OPED. And they created this before we were even a committee, really. Right as they were starting. We had no funding yet. It was just like a whole year of collecting taxes and creating bylaws and figuring out what the processes were going to be. And it's a document that's really deep, and it walks through like, who is Holyoke? What are our demographics? Who are our neighborhoods? What is going on with housing in the city, right? It really walks you through all of the different aspects of a city, right? Because we have those 3 different categories that are very holistic at addressing a city. Then it gets into specific, what are our historic assets in the city, and it names specific historic assets. Then it gets into what it thinks we should do. So I'm going to go down to page 23. So starting where it says needs and opportunities, it reviews these findings from prior public planning efforts and outreach that they did to city departments, as well as a few different events they had at the senior center, for example, where they asked people, what do you want CPA funding to do, right? They took that as well. They did a survey. And out of that came a bunch of goals that they thought we might want to get to. So, for example, open space and recreation, they mentioned water-based recreation and water resource protection, natural resource protection, specific around conservation land, and even naming specific things like thinking about agricultural aspects of the city and wanting to preserve that, as well as green infrastructure. I think we have all probably seen the recent case in the news, right, where the EPA fined the city for all of its combined sewer overflow issues. And, we have these 15 years to, sort of get our act together and separate our sewer pipes from our like sewer system, like the grates that, have water from raw sewage, right? So that like raw sewage isn't going into the river every time it rains. They suggest like being really thoughtful about green infrastructure, like making sure that when we're designing something or working with a land acquisition or recreation, that we also think about green infrastructure, right? So that maybe that's including native plants. Maybe that's being really thoughtful around grading and erosion, right? So they're saying just be aware of those things as you could maybe push applicants to consider it. Parks, they really named that we have so many parks in poor condition, right? That we have a hard time with maintenance. We also just have so many parks. Do you know how many parks we have? I just keep running across new parks and I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that park was here. We have so many pocket parks. And then for affordable housing, they talked about—
idea. There is a list on the parks website, all of them, and it's a lot.
It's a lot. Affordable housing, they talked about having a lot of unmet needs, and that we may want to kind of preserve existing affordable housing. I think that's certainly exemplified by the Chestnut Street Valley Opportunity project that we've been working on, where they're taking existing housing but bringing it up to code, right? Modernizing it, but also, you know, preserving the historic facade. And then supporting downtown revitalization with the new affordable housing development. That is very much exemplified by the Wayfinders project. But they also talk about strategic planning. So really having planning and implementation of initiatives for improvements in core downtown neighborhoods, and really having strategic planning around that. So having like a comprehensive housing study, which they're calling out as us not necessarily having. And again, this was an outside group that worked with the committee to create this. So there may be areas where someone might say, I'm not sure that's exactly true, or I'm not sure that should be a priority area, right? And that's all stuff that could come up when you are talking to your commissions, boards, groups, communities, etc. Okay, they also called out the condition of housing, that it says much of the housing supply in Holyoke's downtown core is over 100 years old. Right. So just calling out the reality that we are a city that is trying to figure out how to revitalize and move forward. We have a lot of existing housing stock. And so we are going to see a lot of need for restoration. Housing for persons with disabilities was called out as being something that we don't have a lot of. There's a lot of shortage of units that are handicapped accessible in the city. And also short-term housing assistance for low-income households. It says also some CPA funds could be used to support home ownership for first-time home buyers through mortgage subsidies or down payment assistance loans. Some local CPAs to us have created that through like the creation of like a housing trust that then works on those pieces, but it does require a lot of infrastructure to be able to do those kinds of programs. Historic preservation calls it significant public buildings and cultural facilities. So really, and some of these, I mean, like the Mater Dolorosa Church doesn't exist anymore, right? But was called out specifically in our preservation plan. But there's a number of specific buildings, and it really names, of course, that we have a lot of municipal buildings that are in need of rehabilitation because they're all 100 years old. Documents, records, and artifacts. I think that definitely is represented well by the clerk's application this time around with the historic ledgers that were restored from City Hall. And then it just says like other historic community assets. Like don't forget it can be used to rehabilitate historic features of public open spaces, right? Like don't forget there's intersectionality between these categories. So it could be a historic feature of a public space like a park, a memorial, or a cemetery. And it could be used to restore historic features of privately owned buildings where they are visible or accessible to the public. So the idea for that is if they're privately owned buildings, then we have to prove public benefit. In some cases, the public benefit is simply, it's like the upkeep of the neighborhood, right? It's to end blight. It's to hold on to the historic character of something, but it has to be that it's primarily in view and can be enjoyed by the public as part of the public benefit. Okay, so overall goals for CPA funding as they were named, projects should be highly visible and accessible, generating broad benefits to the community. So that connects to the part in the scoring rubric where it says like, who are the stakeholders? And is it really getting at a broad number of stakeholders, or is it just like one group is going to benefit? 2, projects should be consistent with other city and regional plans with priority given to those that are part of a coordinated connecting vision for area improvements. 3, projects should not replace funding from the city budget or other sources. That's actually related to law, right? It says, Amy, what's the name of it? Planting piece.
So yeah, no supplanting.
I can't remember the name of it, but there was an issue where
it's the no supplanting law or rule.
Like I think a city at one point had like used it instead of municipal funding for something, and it came out that like you can't supplant a municipal source. Like, oh, this used to be covered by the city government, but now we'll give it to CPA. Right? You have to prove that the city government doesn't have a source of funding for that. It wouldn't move forward otherwise. 4, priorities given to projects that leverage funding from other sources or fill a gap where other sources are not available. That's directly named in our scoring. 5, projects should demonstrate cost sensitivity, both in the short-term use of CPA funds and the long-term maintenance or lifespan of the resource for which the funds are used. I think that's particularly hard and keeps coming up around parks, right? That like we can come up with the funding to replace a park, but what happens with maintenance is something that we're sort of struggling, right, to as a committee to figure out, because we can't address that. You know, we want to be able to make sure that we're creating parks and they're being maintained, but we don't actually have power over that second part. 6, priority is given to projects which facilitate growth in Holyoke's tax base, either directly through investment in taxable property or indirectly through improvements that enhance the neighborhood or encourage private investment. And then 7, priority is given to projects with a public sector or nonprofit applicant or co-applicant above private individuals or for-profit applicants. And I will say what's interesting is that for me, 6 and 7 seem a little contradictory. Right? So they're saying we should prioritize projects that facilitate growth in Holyoke's tax base. They're also saying we should lean into public projects or nonprofit ones over private or for-profit. I do think there's a little bit of tension there, because often it's going to be private or for-profit applicants that are trying to directly facilitate growth in the tax base. I know we see a lot of connections between the indirect tax base around like, oh, this ends blight, this adds to investment, right? This is infill of a vacant lot that leads to investment overwise. You know, we maintain the historic facade of a building, we keep its historic character, the buildings around it also benefit. But it is more indirect than actually helping someone, for example, on like the Right Block project, start new businesses and housing on High Street. So I do see some tension there. And then they name specific ones for each category, right? So open space and rec says we need to improve access to open space and recreation for all Holyoke residents. B, preserve natural resources and promote green infrastructure to enhance and protect neighborhoods. 3, invest in open space and recreation resources that support economic and community development. Historic preservation names to promote revitalization through restoration of the city's historic built environment, document the city's history through preservation of artifacts and documents, and enhance community identity through preservation of historic sites. And for affordable housing, it's to improve the social and economic integration through creating opportunities for home ownership, mixed income communities, and reducing blight in residential neighborhoods, sustaining the supply of affordable housing, in particular to accommodate seniors and people with disabilities, as well as families, individuals, and first-time homebuyers, and to support low and moderate income households in accessing the housing that they can afford. And that specifically names like developing single and 2-family houses on vacant lots, right? That very much fits like the Habitat for Humanity project that we did. Some things we have not done, like I don't think that we necessarily subsidized affordable units in mixed income housing development, although I guess in a way we have through the support of the facade restoration on Wright's Block, because that is going to be mixed development of housing. We certainly have rehabilitated existing apartments to create or preserve affordable units through the Chestnut Street project. We have not really done the second goal, which is to provide temporary rental assistance to households at risk of homelessness, support programs assisting income eligible first-time home buyers, a little bit through the Habitat for Humanity project, and then support programs assisting low-income homeowners with housing rehabilitation. Okay, questions or thoughts that we had looking at the 2018 plan? It's something that every time I go into it, it's like a whole other layer, right? That I'm like holding on to because it's very dense. Yeah, Mary?
Okay, so are you hoping that we will each go back to our respective commissions or interests and ask that each of our groups go over their area and make the suggested changes? Is that what we're doing?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so share what we've done so far, share what it says are your goals, right? That's connected to your area of focus. And then come back to CPA with a report. You know, here's what they said. Yep, looks great. Or actually, we'd love to see this language amended, or we need to see this part named as the priority. This is what CPA should be prioritizing. And if we really have some significant stuff come out of that, then we'll create like a 1-pager addendum to the preservation plan.
And then does it have to be re-voted on by the city council?
It's a good question, but I don't believe so. In fact, I'm not even sure the preservation plan was voted on by city council originally.
Okay.
I don't think it was.
No, it doesn't need to.
No.
So my question is, what do you need in order to feel good about being able to present this to your groups, communities, commissions, boards? Like, do you feel confident being able to do this, or do you need some other resource, some other structure? I'm practicing teacher wait time.
I think it's just starting the process and opening the doors again to our other commissions and their thoughts, right? The commissions, you know, their thoughts.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Michael, were you trying to speak?
I was trying to breathe. Excuse me, in terms of the housing authority, those items that you indicated in terms of housing and affordability and so on and so forth, those are ongoing projects we're actively involved in that we've accomplished in 5 years, and we've got much more to come. So although we don't come before you with the projects and with our handout, in spirit, we are aligned with the goals and thoughts of the preservation plan. But we don't come to you, you know, well, we do, but I mean, not really. But to tell the rest of the committee in terms of housing, our projects that we've done in the last 5 years, and certainly the projects we've got planned in the next 5 years, more than answers some of those concerns brought up on the in the plan. So, like I said, keep up the good work.
I wonder too, Michael, part of this too might be you just filling the committee in, right, on what is going on in your group too, because one of the things it says really clearly is that we're supposed to be promoting some interconnectedness and synergy, right? It's supposed to be like this building of momentum, like, oh, you're doing that on the historic commission? Okay, then we should maybe be focusing on this. Or, oh, you're doing that in housing? Okay, then we can partner with you to get some momentum going. So it might be also sharing on that end too, like the whole Springdale Park thing. Helene, I didn't even know about the Springdale Park master plan until the Jones Point Park master plan came to us. And that was interesting. Like, oh, why isn't Springdale Park coming to us for some of staging out some of its stuff? Is it because it's just going to be owned by other funding sources? Or is that something that we should have known about, right? Like, so some of it's that too.
Yeah. Well, and that one in particular, it qualifies for the CDBG funding. And so there's been a lot of effort that really Izzy Rivera kind of started, and when he was in this position, to be strategic about where we come to CPA for funding. If it's not covered by other funding, you know, to like really try to like maximize. So I think though there's some stuff coming up with Springdale that's going to be a little pricey. So my guess is we'll be asked to throw in some stuff there.
But I think that's okay. Like part of it is too, like sometimes it's like trying to get some synergy going so you can show to the public like, yep, we're making progress on this. And sometimes it takes multiple funding sources to make that happen. And so that can be okay too. Even if there is CDBG funding, there may be a reason why, right? We want to also have CPA, you know, jump in so we can move something along faster or stage out 2 pieces of something instead of, you know, 1, or scale something up.
Yeah, totally.
Amy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think it would be really important to include the public survey information, or at least some of that, because you know, showing that, you know, we did go to the trouble of collecting information from the public. That's happened more recently than the plan. So, and I think that also shows the public, yeah, we listen to you. In fact, we have incorporated your responses in this addendum, you know, because there are charts and things like that to show what sort of projects people would want, or at least comments. I also think, I know I'm part of the CPA community peer network group. We meet once a month. And one of the things they have suggested doing is going to the departments, the city departments as well, to ask, you know, what would you like to see in the future from CPA, or what could you see being funded? I mean, of course, many of those people would be already people who apply, but they still might have ideas that could be put in there.
So that's an interesting idea. And it makes me think about a conversation that I had with the mayor a few months ago about this summer, before the CPA application goes live, adding it to a department head meeting agenda where you and I can be there and we can make the case, right? For here's what CPA is used for, it can be used for, and then asking the department heads while they're in the same space to start brainstorming and talking. Yeah. Because one thing that's happened in the past is like one department head doesn't know what someone else is doing and they both ask for a lot of money, and then you're asking the CPA to decide what's the priority, versus like, you all know what's going on and what a lot of these different funding sources are. If you can collaborate and talk to each other and communicate, then you can bring one project to us, or you'll sort of know, like, here's our budget next year. Like, you can't ask for more than the following. So be thoughtful about what you're bringing us and make sure it's really what you want us, you know, to fund. Because sometimes we've had to, you know, almost, you know, decide what we think the city priority should be between departments, and that doesn't feel great.
Yeah, I think it should definitely be an in-person meeting.
Yeah. Okay. I will create like a short process that will just name, like, here are some things you could do when you meet with your respective groups, or just talk to people that you know, right? I think also just reaching out to the public is important too, for like, what things do they want to see CPA tackle? In some ways, CPA can be really flexible. But like, we can move in a lot of directions because we can tackle housing, historic preservation, open space, recreation, right? Like, there's a lot of sources of funding there. And so I think talking to the public around like, what do you want to see, also helps, because what we've discovered is that some people know how to get us as a source of funding. They're used to cycles. They know how to fill out an application. They kind of feel like, oh, I belong in that room. I know how to make a funding application. I'll move forward in the process. And other people don't. And so if they don't, we have to hear them, listen to them, and then figure out what city department to go to say, people want to see this moved along. Can you put in an application for that? Like, we got to push the city departments based on what we're hearing from the public. So I think of that, like, I don't have a group to go to, right? I'm not appointed by a board or a commission. I'm appointed by the city council. I'm a community rep. So I think my role, along with like Maribel and Francesca, is like, I'm going to just reach out to the public. I'm going to reach out to people that I know and say, like, what are the things that you wish the city was addressing? And because I know what CPA funding can be used for, I can guide it to like, is there a park that you really wish we were trying to restore? Is there something that you really wish we had at a park that we just don't have, right? Like, I think the Kennedy Field part's a really great example, where like people in the community were like, we want a playground that's fully accessible for our kids that can't use a single city playground that you offer, right? That was great, right? Or maybe it's historic preservation. Is there a building in your neighborhood that you really wish didn't look like that? All right, or something that was saved. So I just think we have to reach out to people and ask, and we can also play that role as the community reps. And I think all of us can too, is reach out to the public and like, what do you hear? So I think we should be responsive to the people. Okay. Mary, you have a question?
Do you have a deadline for when you want this information back? Or you said something about developing a short process for us.
Yes, I will develop a short process and I'll get that out by email within the next week or two. And I would like it if we could share back to the committee in June.
Okay, so at our next meeting. No, wait a minute, next meeting is May. Okay, next meeting, and so 2 months. Okay.
It's that you'll have time to make a plan, figure out where you can get it on. If you're trying to get on an agenda somewhere, like get on the agenda, all that stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions on that? Are we good to move?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Unless you really need me to vote on something, I think I need to take a little break. I'm just not feeling my top self right now.
Please do, Ethan.
Okay.
Completely okay.
All
Feel
right.
better,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you very much. Right.
Good night. Feel better.
Hope you feel better.
Thanks.
Or Nathan has food poisoning, and he was still in the meeting. Love Nathan. Talk about dedication. Okay. 6, review of possible homeowner historic home restoration program. So, and Peter Palmbell is here. So I have like a short update, and then more is going to come in May because we moved our meeting up from the bottom of April up to the middle point, like sort of lost 2 weeks to make things happen. So me, Peter Palmbella, who lives in the Hadley, sorry, Peter, help me out. What's the official title? What's the official name?
The Hadley Falls Company Housing District.
Down in Ward
1.
We met along with Beth Goslin, who's on the local historic district from Fairfield Ave, and Chris Gothlier from the Historic Commission to talk about this possibility of creating a program that would support individual homeowners restoring their homes. And the thing that immediately came out was this tension between wanting to figure out how to launch a program that felt administratively possible and not too large, and so like doable, and wanting there to be broad representation across all wards. Because it'd be easy in a lot of ways to say, well, it only applies to the local historic district, which is Fairfield Ave, because it already has restrictions. We wouldn't have to put restrictions on people's homes. It already has a restriction, right? Or we could look at the housing, the Hadley Falls
Company Housing District.
All right, the Hadley Falls Company Housing District. There we go. It's written down. Have my stuff down. We could use that as well. And then immediately, Peter was like, I wouldn't work, right? Because you have something so unique happening in that area. Peter, do you want to talk about why? Like the character.
So my house is a row house, and it's like a sausage that's been sliced up 8 ways. It's one building, but I'm one of 8 owners of the building. The building has a unique style of architecture. You wouldn't want to make one slice look different from the others because its charm is that it was worker housing. So you would want it to all look the same. And my building is one of 3 buildings that are identical. And there are 2 yet other buildings in the district that are also very similar in the same situation. So if I'm to do anything here, I need to work with my neighbors. I think my best example is when I need to fix my front gutter, I have to organize between 8 owners and we all repair the gutter along the front. So it is a little bit of a project, and that's just the gutter, let alone something like the roofs or pointing the bricks or doors or windows or anything like that. We don't have any sort of owners association, or there's no, when they put this together in 1974, they didn't have those types of organizations. And I don't think they had local historic districts at the time either. Not that I don't think a local historic district would really work down here, though, because we've seen the problems with keeping it going up on Fairfield Avenue. And I think it would be even more of a problem down here. So they are somewhat unique, but they're really not that unique to us because there are other row houses in Holyoke as well. There are other attached structures that would have similar issues. So Megan's idea, I think, was for like a standalone home, but that wouldn't function for us.
Yeah. So quickly, it was like, oh, that wouldn't work for you. You would need a very different kind of program. And it also highlighted how important it is to try to support the row houses, but also the complexity in it. Like Peter was talking about, well, what happens when you're trying to get anything done, but one of the owners has died and the estate is unclear and there's no one to work with, or there's been a foreclosure and you're trying to get the bank to agree to something and they're not going to sign off on this application for CPA funding, or it was like, there's really been some issues with why they can't access sources of funding. So it's just something that I want us to be aware of. And it's something that I want to keep thinking through how we could fix it. I don't know how yet, but it is something that we're exploring and trying to figure out. So I do think it's a really iconic section of Ward 1 that I would love to see its, historic character preserved. Selfishly, my aunt and uncle owned a house at on Grover Street. And I spent a lot of time down there growing up and have a lot of fond memories. So it's just a really iconic area of the city. But I don't think the plan for the vision that we had for this program would work given its complexity. Michael, you have your hand up.
Oh, yes, Madam Chairman and Peter. As you illustrated, both of you illustrated, Megan more specifically, I wonder this is more of an attorney's issue and what's in the deed or the buyer's agreement that when the person who buys the condo, so to speak, was aware of and agreed to. So I'm not so sure we have the authority or the legal department to sort this out. This is something that I have to say either the mayor or the city council would instruct the city solicitor to look at to see if we can help, if they can help out in some way. I'm not so sure we have either the money or the authority to get involved in legal binding agreements between banks and the city and what's on the dotted line when you signed your name that you would purchase it and what you agreed to. I'm not so sure we want to get involved in that. That's not really our area. We don't have the money for it anyway, but just a thought. I think it's something that's a little out of our realm of responsibilities.
Yeah, it's a question though. And I wonder about us reaching out to OPED or I don't know.
Well, if I can speak to that.
Yeah.
So we do have One Holyoke. And One Holyoke is the same organization that did the major renovations down here in 1973, 74. And they have been trying to assist us. And they are listed in the deed. They are listed in the historic preservation easements in our deeds. But at this point, we have problems with these easements saying that we have to preserve things and that One Holyoke has to approve things. But One Holyoke doesn't have funds to hire preservation specialists to tell me, exactly what door I should be replacing my door with, or how I should be renovating my dormers right now. So it's a funding issue for them as well.
Yeah. Well, we can reach out to Mike Murray too and sort of see what comes of that as well. Mary, you have your hand up?
Yeah, sorry. I just, some of what I was going to ask has been clarified, but first of all, these are condominiums, right?
No.
Oh, they're not condominiums.
These are independently owned homes. There is no condo association. Condo associations didn't exist when this was done in 1974. Before that, this was all still owned by the Whiting Thread Company.
So when you purchased your home, you purchased it from a previous owner, not from One Holyoke and not from, okay.
Correct.
And so One Holyoke is in your deed as the holder of a conservation preservation?
I would assume that's what it means. It's somewhat vague.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with Michael in regards to so you had an attorney that did your closing, correct? And I wonder what the attorney would say about what did they tell you at the time in terms of, the requirements that were on you for abiding by historic restrictions?
Nothing more than making us aware that they were there. But when we bought this one, it was 2000. That was now 23 years ago. The building really didn't need that much. It was still in pretty good shape from the 74 renovations. But since that time, a lot more has started to go wrong, and it needs a lot more work now.
And are there other people in your community that are in agreement with you that you need some help with this?
Yes, but there's no overall leadership except me, and I'm a self-appointed leader here.
Yeah.
Yep, that's baffling. So yeah, it sounds like I'm glad to hear Megan's thinking of reaching out to Mike Moriarty, and I think, yeah, maybe you want to talk to your attorney about what to do next.
Helene, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm not unmuted. I just wanted to say, because what this program would be, if I recall from the last meeting, is it would help pay for the preservation that it sounds like technically supposed to be done, but it's hard to figure out exactly what that is going to look like and what is necessary. It's sort of to say it should be done with a particular kind of material or in a particular kind of way. You need to know what that is. And I'm just wondering if the aspect, because it's not like it's mostly about getting money into the housing and into the, to the owners can actually make those repairs. Like if that changes the dynamic, because I understand the challenges of one building, multiple owners, something goes wrong, there's foreclosure, those issues are there, but that there might be some properties where everyone could coordinate and that the building would kind of apply as a group of, creating some maybe very, some kind of entity, whatever, to apply, or as each family. And then, the CPA would provide funding to do these projects. Did Springfield require, they would pay a portion, but not all of it? Is that how it worked in Springfield?
Yeah. So the thing that we realized quickly was that what they were dealing with in this district was so specific that it wouldn't work for the generalized program that we had started to think about, imitating from Springfield. There would have to be a totally different program. So I'm just like, it's more that I want the committee to hold on to, like, this is something that may come up for us, but in a very different way. It's not going to be attached to this historic individual homeowner restoration program if we choose to go there. But that doesn't prevent us from thinking about creating a funding source, for example, that would provide matching historic doors for the housing company, housing area. And then individual homeowners, as they want access to that funding, could have access to that funding, right? Like that's something that we could consider in the future, now that I'm sort of learning more about this area and what they need. But it would be something totally different because there's just like a totally different set of characteristics to the buildings also. It's like the things that they may need is like, facade work with masonry, or like, roofing support or historic doors, right? Like the work looks different than the work we were sort of considering initially imitating the Springfield program.
Yeah.
So when we met, the pieces we held on to from the Springfield program is that we would use a sliding scale, that it's a reimbursement program. So they would have to do the work. And then a historic preservationist that we would work with through Penn Planning Commission would come and like inspect the work, check off that it was done and that it was done to the standards that it's required for historic buildings. And then they could reimburse, right, from the CPA fund up to a certain amount on a sliding scale. So folks who had the lowest percent of, to average median income could, get up to, right, say $20,000. Whereas someone who is over the average median income may only be able to get $2,000, right? So it would be thoughtful based on how much income are you already making. And the thought was that we would restrict it to restoration of historic painting. It's really specific. We have a lot of like older Victorian homes that are like god awful. I was talking to one of my neighbors the other day who said that when he repainted his house 5 years ago, it cost $22,000. I was like, that's wild. That is wild, right? Like that's a down payment on a home. That's crazy. So it may be that, it's a funding source that tackles sort of historic restoration of painting, that handles front porches that are historic in nature, right? A lot of those older homes had that front porch. And it might also be tied to doors or roofs, right? So those are we were thinking like we could narrow it. One of the ways to make it a more administratable program is you narrow what someone could ask for. The other thing is, do you lean the way of, well, it would just be for the local historic district, which is on Fairfield. I like it and I don't like it. I like it because they already have restrictions and the committee doesn't have to deal with any restrictions. They're already restricted. I don't like it because it's really specific to one street and one ward. Don't love that. So the other option is that we could widen the scope, right? Remember, Holyoke, Springfield has a lot of historic districts. So as a result, like they can say, oh, it's just local historic districts. But if there's one, right, across all these different wards, it feels more balanced as a program than if we said just local historic districts, it's one street, right, in one ward. That feels different than Springfield's route, but they have more local historic districts than we do. So we could go the route of saying, no, we're going to do everything that's on the state or federal register. I'm going to show you this really quick. So this is MACRIS. This is how you can check to see if something is in fact considered historic on the state or federal register. And the crazy part is this is Holyoke. I'm going to check that out. Right. So everything in our border, right? I'm going to zoom out so you can see the whole city. Look how many historic buildings we have. It's like blew my mind when I looked at it originally. Like that is wild how many historic buildings we have in our city, right? So yes, that's another option. As we could say, well, if your house is already on the state or federal register, right? It's on MACRIS, we can see that it's here. Then we could open it there. See these green triangles? That's the local historic district that we have, right? That's the Fairfield Ave aspect. And you can see lots of houses, right? It's a fairly large local historic district in that way. But you can see that if you look at all these blue dots, we have historic houses that are in every ward of the city. So that's another option is we could say any house that's historic in nature, because you can prove it because your house is on MACRIS here, could be eligible for the funding. Mm-hmm. The can of worms that opens is, do you then say, yes, you can have this funding, but you have to agree to a preservation restriction on your house, which makes all of your other work more expensive.
Right.
Like by an order of magnitude, not just by a small amount. I don't know. So that's the piece that I'm like really needing feedback on, is that what direction to go. Helene, I'm going to go back to you because I think you were still in the middle of a thought when I was trying to give that overview, and then we'll go to Mary and Amy.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I just, I was sort of talking, like understanding that this would be very different in the Hadley Falls. Is that right? Hadley Falls company housing, something. And that one way to kind of clarify things and potentially make it easier, and again, it might be something that could be done through the regular historic process, would be if a building came and proposed work, and if instead of this kind of sliding scale, we actually just paid for the whole thing, because that might just make that functional, right? Where the building would accept the restriction or potentially already has one, but it wouldn't be coordinating all of these different folks and their incomes and, who's like a trust is owning this house and et cetera. But if it just paid for that work, it seems like that might be easier to get a lot of different owners of a building on the same page, because it's, essentially just taking in the money as opposed to this kind of match or reimbursement. So just something to think about for the future. Obviously, that's not for now, but that does seem like people might be a little bit more able to coordinate things if it's not a matter of them putting money out. So
yeah, And I think the way that Springfield does it is has to be a house that is individually owned, but could be a multifamily up to 3 units, but it has to be owner occupied. So it could be a house that is a 2-family or one of these older houses that has been bisected, trisected into apartments since then, but still has the historic facade, but the homeowner lives there. That kind of property would be eligible. Mary?
Okay, so I wanted to ask Mr. Palumbo, have you been there when they needed a new roof?
Yes.
And how did it get paid for?
One Holyoke pulled that project together for us, and we paid our portion of it. It was more than 15 years ago now, so I forget all the specifics of it.
Well, and so all 8 families or 8 owners agreed, and they put their money in.
Yes.
Oh, well, then that kind of sounds like One Holyoke is inroads. The other thing, why isn't this? I mean, when you go on MACRIS, you see it right away, and it pops right out. This the Hadley Falls housing district. Does anyone know why is it not called a historic district now? Do you have to apply separately? Do you have to get together and apply to have it be a historic district?
It is a historic district. It's on the National Register, but it's not a local historic district.
Oh, that's the difference. The local historic different district. Okay. Yeah, because you can see that it's on the National Register. It kind of sounds like that would be a step. Okay, thank you. Oh, also, Megan, do you know how they cope with Mattoon Street? Because Mattoon Street, when you go there, all the houses are attached and they all have the same front shape, but they're all different. They're all decorated differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I can ask Bob McCarroll.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Amy. You're muted.
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. Yeah, this was something I discussed once with Stuart Saginaw at the Community Preservation Coalition, and he did kind of warn me that when you get into that it's very complicated when the Community Preservation Committee awards funds to private homeowners. Because then it can be very competitive and they're, difficult to sort out what is really for the public benefit when it comes to private owners that, of course, this increases the value of their property and then they can sell their property later, that sort of thing. The other thing is just to a reminder that MACRIS is something that people can add documents to, but it's not the same as being on the state or federal national register.
That's true. Yeah, I think it gives a visual to show that we have a lot of historic homes and they're in every ward. But you're right. I mean, we'd have to be very specific that they would have to prove that they're on the state or national register.
And just want to add, he did say that the way that he's seen it work best is when it is limited to a historic district like Fairfield. Even though, yes, it's true, there's only the one in Holyoke. It just makes it a lot simpler. It can be very, very complicated to figure out which house is more worthy than another otherwise. So.
I think so. That's why Springfield does a lottery. No one wants to be in the business of saying like your home's more important than your home. I think that just leads to like nepotism and to like a lot of not great things occurring. And so Springfield felt really clearly that like, while it might seem great to say, well, that these 3 homes are so historic, they need to be maintained, that it doesn't feel fair to the taxpayer, right?
Right. It's a lottery, but it's still based on the historic districts that have to fulfill certain. So what you're proposing now wouldn't do that. It would include people outside of historic district. Right. So that's the distinction. Yeah.
Right. Well, and mostly because, and not that we have to, we could certainly move forward with the assumption that we'll just do a local historic district, but I think politically we'd get killed. I don't think it would move forward We could try. We could pitch it.
Well, you
but
know,
I think it'd be hard for the
it
public
might
to
be
accept it.
like a way to pilot it would be to start in a safer way with just the historic district and see how that goes before opening it to everyone, just because it's a whole new thing that hasn't been done before.
I agree it would be easier to administer, but I don't think it would ever happen. I think it would not get agreed on by city council. I think it'd be really hard for the majority of city council or board reps. So that would mean you're asking the majority of people on council to vote for funding for one specific ward of which they're not a representative. I think they'd have a really hard time being able to do it. So even though I agree with supporting a historic district, the fact that we as a city don't have more and should have more. We really should have more local historic districts, but they're hard to maintain. And staff and all the stuff that we know happens with the Fairfield local historic district. Although they really have regrouped, right? Like they kind of was struggling as a group, had sort of gone defunct for a while, and now is sort of rebuilding itself. So it may be true that in the future, they also create new local historic districts.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking, I wonder if CPA funds could go towards an analysis or a study of what should be a historic district. That, you know, that could be another way to use CPA funds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that Chris could bring to the Historic Commission to see if there's appetite for it. I think, again, administering local historic districts has been problematic for the city. So I think it's been hard to push forward with the development of more as a result. Michael, your hand's up.
Yes, Madam Chairman. Mary, to answer your question and regarding the Hadley Falls Housing District, it was referred to back then as an historic district verbally. It was never really established legally. It was a term that was used, well, it's the Hadley Falls, I think they call it the Hadley Falls worker building area. And it was verbally called historic, but it was never officially identified in a process. But it was just verbal. Like even I think in the documents, it was just verbal. That's all it was. Mary, that's why how it ended up being what it ended up being. Back then, it was assumed, but it was never followed through in those regards. We were mostly involved in getting the money to administer the program. Peter, what I would do, I would stick with Holyoke 1 to pursue the gutters and everything else. And if you wanted to get into even more minutiae detail, go back to 1974 as the Community Development Block Grant Committee under Mayor Topier that drew up that funding and the constitution, if you will, for that district. And they had very specific guidelines and requirements. So I hate to say this, but you or somebody with perhaps a legal background would have to read into that and go back and say, Peter, as many years later, are you still obligated to these conditions? Because it was paid for by the public using public funds, the Community Block Grant Development Fund under Mayor Topier that built this. So you may be obligated whether you want to or not by those obligations since 1974. It's just food for thought. I mean, if Holyoke 1 had put the roofs in, ask them to continue. Obviously, they've got the legal and the administrative know-how, rather than you tilting at windmills alone, and go to them and say, look, we want to put up new gutters. Can we do the same thing? Just to help out. Food for thought.
If I can speak to that really quick.
Sure.
So I think our biggest problem right now is that some of these properties are in a state. So One Holyoke has a problem with organizing some of these buildings. Like there's a roof that they want to do the roof on Grover Street, but one of the owners there died tragically, and the property's in a state, and the family, it's not settled. There's a lawsuit in court. So you have one of the units simply not cooperating with those efforts right now. And that's kind of a roadblock for them. The other big issue we have is I have no design standards. I don't know what my siding on my dormers should really look like. They put aluminum on it in 1974, but that's not historically correct. So I don't really know what I'm supposed to do, and who am I to set the design standard for the entire district? If I had a standalone Victorian, I mean, I would just hire a preservation specialist to come in, you know, and we would go through the whole rest of the process. But since we're talking about a whole bunch of buildings all the same, I need more guidance there. So if through CPA or some other means, we could at least do a little bit of a study and get some design standards and figure those things out, that would be great. I mean, I would start to work right away if I knew exactly what things to do. Like the doors need work, the windows need work, the dormers, the siding's about to blow right off of them. And some of the roofs on some of the other buildings need work. So those are my challenges right now. It's not so much money as organization and design standards and what is the date of preservation for this district? We don't know that either. Is it supposed to be 1848, 1900, 1950? What date are we preserving it at? And I don't think that's been established either.
Well, I would go back and read the original documents since 1974. And I think, Peter, you better clarify before you buy a rake, before you do anything. You get the legalese out of the way, because you may be getting into a lot of trouble by some lawyer, I don't know, somebody somewhere. You better get your legal house, and not your legal house, but the problem's legal house in order before you do anything, because you maybe put up a beautiful door or window or gutter only to have it taken down by somebody. So before you spend a dime, I think you better get your legalese questions answered. I would stick with Holyoke 1 and let them do it. Quite frankly, they've got the staff and they've got the money. Don't let them tell you different. They got a lot of money. Terry Murphy gave them a bucket load of money, a bucket load. In the last in the ARPA funds, they got a ton of dough. So anyway, that being said, I wish you all the luck and keep the faith.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
We're going to wrap that agenda item and move to the last one. I'm going to draft up. I'm supposed to be attending the local historic district meeting Thursday to hear directly from them. And then I'll try to draft up in writing some current thoughts. And then the committee will discuss and decide if it's something they want to explore and move forward with, or if they don't. Right? This is something that I think a number of folks over the years has expressed interest in CPA exploring. And it's something that we can decide to move forward with or not. But it's something that I think we should talk about publicly, so the community knows we have explored it as an idea. And then we will just have to debate its merits, pros and cons. And I think there are pros and cons. And then figure out if we want to move forward or not. Okay. We are going to move to the last agenda item, which is just sharing what's happened with our FY20. Maybe I should say 23 there. My apologies. FY23 recommended projects. So all of our projects were approved. You heard from Amy that there seems to have been a slight typo with the order, that the amounts were a little off. Like one was $900 off, one was $500 off, I think.
Yeah.
Regardless, it's just, she's running that communication to make sure with the clerk that it's the right amounts, because they did not vote to amend to reduce the funding suggestions that we had offered. So I think it's just a typo. But they voted to approve all of our recommendations. It was unanimous for the rights block, and the rights block had 3 dissenting votes. Everyone else voted for it. Exciting stuff. And the next step will be for Amy to start working on drafting the contracts and starting to, move that process along. One thing I wanted to share was the sort of like year in review video that I made. I'm not sure if everyone saw it. But I wanted to make a year in review video that just sort of showed in video form what we did this year. Because I think there's a lot of members of the public where video is how they get information now. Still can't believe the look of those ledgers. And that is something that I shared to our Facebook page and to Holyoke. I think it's hard because of social media. Like the problem is that likes drive more likes, right? It's like how it works. Like if your post doesn't immediately get 20 likes, no one will see it after 15 minutes. It's just gone. The algorithm just edits it out. So much of what I've learned around in Holyoke, where so much of the news is shared through Facebook, is like you have to understand their algorithm and play the game, which I really don't like. Hard to get information in front of people if you don't get enough likes initially, right? Like the Glowtech Woods post that I put up with the whatchamacallit, the Canva flyers on Hello Holyoke. You know, between the posts that I've done the last few days, we've had about 11,000 people who have had access to information about what our committee's been doing. I think that's really important. But so much of that is like driven by the Facebook algorithm, right? So there's that. And then it's just getting our information out there. We're often covered in the news. So I think we're in, the Republican or in the Gazette. I know that Mary had reached out to the Sun to share the GoTech event that we're doing to try to get some press there. I think it's just, trying to get the word out there about what we're doing so the public is aware and they see the benefit. I think it's really important for the public to know the work the committee is doing because I think it inspires pride in the community to know that we're investing in it.
Beautifully. Well put.
So thank you everyone for doing all of that work, for sharing the news, and thank you for sharing links or liking posts if you did. I appreciate you because all of that just in this day and age is what allows us to share what we do. So thank you.
Oh, you guys do, as I said before, it's outstanding. In 5 years, look what this committee has done in 5 short years. Absolutely remarkable. Remarkable. I'd be hard pressed to come up with a committee that I've ever served on that's done so good in so little time. With so few people. I mean, it really is outstanding. Well done, Madam Chairman, and fellow committee members now and in the past. You did, it just speaks for itself.
Agreed. Thank you, everybody. I'm really proud of this cycle. I think we've gotten some really good work done. Excited about the next cycle. Basically, we're going to be tracking like what's happening with projects over the next 2 meetings. And moving forward with exploring this idea and hopefully voting to move forward or not move forward with this by June. And in June, hearing back from everybody, reaching out to their committees, boards, community groups. So that'll be sort of our June meeting. In the past, we've usually taken July or August off. So we'll talk about that as a committee for like which months do we not want to meet. And then we launch a new cycle, like applications go live end of July, early August for Historic. So, and then we got a new ball game. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your good work. And
our next meeting, Madam Chairman?
We're going to try to stick with a regular meeting time of 6 p.m. on the second Wednesday of the month, which would mean May 10th.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, do we have to move to end this or?
Yeah.
Just
we have a
motion to adjourn at 7:44.
Second.
Woo. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Good night. Bye-bye.